The Pacific Ocean is larger than the Earth's total landmass and connects people and cultures in a unique way. The Pacific Islands, also referred to as Oceania, comprise vast terrestrial and marine ecosystems and are home to most of the world's biodiversity. Contrary to their peaceful image, the Pacific Islands are experiencing increasing social, ethnic, and political tensions and conflicts that are aggravated, if not caused, by the unfolding climate crisis, as well as the globally organized ruthless exploitation of its natural resources and the resulting disputes. The region's environmental and social challenges are numerous. Agricultural and industrial pollution, ocean acidification, overfishing, terrestrial and marine mining, deforestation, radioactivity, and hazardous waste dumping are taking their toll on ecosystems and societies. Island states are the first to suffer the effects of the climate crisis, which is already causing the loss of life and livelihoods, and is forcing residents to abandon their villages and ancestral lands. To this day, the region remains colonized and militarized. More than 1/3 of the 17 non-self-governing territories recognized by the United Nations are located in Oceania. Denied the right to determine their own political and economic future, it is difficult for many Pacific communities to develop sustainably and along their own cultural lines. Indigenous Melanesians in West Papua, East Indonesia, are exposed to discrimination and violence. Political prisoners, torture, killings by security forces, and hundreds of arrests during countless demonstrations reflect the degree of political and racial oppression. The region is a microcosm of challenges the world faces today. The Blue Continent's people and environment are already experiencing the adverse impacts brought on by the climate crisis and the ruthless exploitation of terrestrial and maritime resources. Local initiatives, churches, environmental and development organizations are building networks across Oceania and strongly demand political, economic, and environmental justice. Today, Pacific Islanders are calling for a demilitarized future for the region, with security provided not by foreign military bases, but by a strong and independent local economy centered on traditional cultures and environmental sustainability.
Welcome, everyone. I'm glad that you all join us here on a Monday evening, on a sunny Monday evening in Germany, that you choose this talk about deep sea mining and the situation in Tonga over barbecuing and a day at the lake or whatever. So we appreciate that. Thanks a lot for joining. And this is Jan Pingel speaking, coordinator of the Ozeanien-Dialog, Oceania-Dialog, a network of 8 organizations, and doing lobby and campaign work in Germany and Europe together with partners in the Pacific on several issues I will mention in a second. With me today is Tita Kara from Tonga, the coordinator of the deep sea mining coordinator of the Civil Society Forum of Tonga. She will also have the opportunity to introduce herself and the situation in Tonga in a few minutes. Thanks to all joining today. I see many people who also joined us last week for our discussion on climate justice with our 2 wonderful guests from Fiji. And yeah, I'm glad that you joined us here again for this second event of the theme month on like the publication we came up with as Ozeanien-Dialog, Brennglas globale Herausforderungen, or in English, Oceania, a microcosm of global challenge. What I'm going to do before I give the floor to Tita, she's the expert on deep sea mining and the situation in the Pacific, I will shortly share my screen just for a second. And I hope you can all see this. We're going to talk in this theme month about challenges in the Pacific region, and we talk to guests from the Pacific about the situation they are facing. Last week, as I mentioned, we talked about climate justice. This day we talk about resource exploitation and deep sea mining. Next week it's going to be about activism, art, poetry, and the Pacific approach to this. And on the 28th, we're going to talk about the human rights situation in West Papua. We identified these issues together with partners in the Pacific, and they are all kind of mentioned here and identified in the map. These are all issues we feel as international players have a leverage. We can make a difference on the international arena. And so we identified these issues. And we're really happy that today Tita is joining us to tell us a bit more about deep sea mining and the issue of resource exploitation, resource injustice. I'm not going to go into details what deep sea mining is. What I wanted to show you to the ones who have no idea about deep sea mining is that it's not existing so far. There is no deep sea mining, but we are so close of the reality where deep sea mining is existing. And there are several countries and companies who are looking at the deep sea for several reasons. They're looking at what is mentioned here as manganknollen, polymetallic nodules here on the floor of the ocean. We look at crusts at the seamounts, or black smokers, which are rich in minerals. We have the high sea, which is international waters, and we have the exclusive economic zones. And when we talk about the exclusive economic zones, we talk about huge exclusive economic zones in the Pacific. Kiribati, for example, their exclusive economic zone is as big as India. Just to give you an idea of how big these areas are and how many resources might be there and might be exploited in the future. So we're talking about a new industry, an experimental industry, which has never been seen before, which has been dreamed of for a long time, and it's on the edge of becoming a reality. And the Pacific Island countries, the Pacific Island communities are at the forefront of this new battleground, I would say, the new struggle against deep sea mining and in the fight to protect the oceans. And we are in contact with people in this struggle for quite a long time. This is a picture from few years ago, 2017, from Papua New Guinea, where communities are protesting against deep sea mining, which they stopped from becoming a reality just a few kilometers off their coast. And the situation in Papua New Guinea is a symbol and also, I think, a motivation for many other groups all over the Pacific who now face this new industry. People in Fiji, in the Cook Islands, and in Tonga. And we're happy that Tita is here today with us, not only because she's from an area which might be affected from deep sea mining, but as I said, the Pacific Island countries and the communities are at the forefront of this international struggle against deep sea mining. And we're talking to Tita, who is not only living there, but coordinating and being a main figure of the whole campaign, not only in Tonga, but in the Pacific. And so we can have deeper insights and firsthand news about what does it mean to live and work in Tonga and in the Pacific and being threatened by a new industry, which is an experiment and that might threaten livelihoods, not only in the Tongan archipelago, but all over the Pacific. So that's it for me. You can check out our website and find a bunch of information about deep sea mining, interviews, studies in German, in English. So please do so. And that's it from my end. And I will give the floor to Tita. Maybe you can introduce yourself a bit more. I briefly did it. And then Tita is going to give a keynote and give us some information about the situation in Tonga. Afterwards, we have the possibility to ask questions. If you don't feel like asking them in English, you can ask in German and we translate it, or you put your questions in the chat. Yeah, so thanks a lot for joining again. And Tita, you have the floor.
Thank you, Yin. And I really appreciate the opportunity to actually speak to people who are probably much older than me and more experienced in the industry than me, and those who wanted to learn a little bit more about the Pacific and especially Tonga. Two briefly points about Tonga. Tonga is the only remaining island in the whole Pacific that's still led by a king. We have never been colonized, even though we were under the British protected regime. We enjoy a lot of freedom in Tonga compared to the other Pacific Islanders. But one thing we have in common is a threat from the deep sea mining industry. Tonga does not have much of the actual resources per se. We don't have gold in our terrestrial area. I think the riches that we have are actually in the ocean. We have a lot of whole land area and sea is actually 700,000, and 1% of that is on land, and the remaining 99% is of the sea. Over 90% of all coastal villages in Tonga are actually around the coastal areas. So basically 99% of our people depends on the sea for their livelihood. That's why the ocean is really important to us. I know we don't feature much in the debate about resources in the international fora because we don't have much of that. Most of our islands are basically raised coral islands. We have a few volcanic islands in Tonga, but doesn't have much of that resources like gold, copper, that Papua New Guinea and Fiji are endowed with. So, but that's in 1889 when we actually have our first constitution and when we were united as the kingdom. I think one of the king's statement of the day was that Tonga is rich because of its people. So compared to the other Pacific Islanders, I think we have most of the PhD in relation to people ratio. So basically, that's what we do. We fight with our brains, and that's what we have been trying to do over the years. Civil society, I've started involved in deep sea mining in 2012 when European Union funded the SPC deep sea mining project in Fiji as a regional project. So I was part of that group that mobilized the commencements of written of the Mineral Act in Tonga, which was passed in a cabinet in 2014. When Nautilus was pushing to mine Papua New Guinea, and there was a lot of protests from the people there, Tonga actually came out as the potential second location. That's when we hype up the whole rally in Tonga, holding national consultation, lobbying various ministers and the church and the youth. So they kind of like die away. So we consider that our first victory. A couple of years ago, 2019 to be specific, when Deep Green took over from Nautilus and Domo become a big force pushing for community projects, their profiles start rising very fast. They were in the front of the discussion. People were thinking that they're bringing in this much money, and because they advocate they were not mining in Tonga, rather the area saying it's miles and miles away from Tonga, it will never be felt in Tonga. That's when we start hyping up our lobbying and pushing the statement to actually ban deep sea mining at the beginning, we were thinking of the whole moratorium in 2012. Since 2019 and last year, we had a big national consultation that we zoomed across the whole 5 islands, and we came back unanimously. Over 100 some people were there saying we wanted to ban deep sea mining, not only in our EEZ, but also in the area. After everyone during the Zoom see the connectivity between the ocean, and it might be, thousands of miles away, but given the current and the tide flows in the Pacific, we know it will eventually end up in our shores. And what happened in Hawaii or in Fiji, Australia, or New Zealand will also impact Tongans, because we have people living around the world as well. So that's why we centralize the campaign and up the hype. And thanks to projects like Oceanien-Dialog with Yen, TSCC with Sehen. We have various members who are actually joining, and they call it the Pacific Strategy, resourcing us with information and media products that we can actually distribute here in Tonga. We also wanted to be involved in public dialogue. We have been doing that across the region. We have been reaching out with letters to the Canadian government, to the British government. We've also support Yen in some of his endeavors through your government. And it has been reaping really good impact. As far as deep green is concerned, in Tonga, they used to have been really visible, very vocal in the public conversation. Now, it's an unfortunate event that the national manager had passed away a couple of weeks ago, and they are recruiting a replacement. But we have this feeling that in the past 6 months, we have found that some of Deep Green's public campaign has deliberately missed out Tonga's name. So we're having a feeling that we're actually making headways, that we're becoming a political noise that they rather not be associated with. Nauru and Kiribati now seems to be the main focus of their attention. There's also a possibility that they have enticed the 2 years clause. Okay, the 2 years clause is under the UNCLOS, or the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea, can be activated if a state country would write to ISA and request that mining should proceed because the contractor has been investing so much money so far. So my understanding that Nauru has activated the 2 years clause, and now the timeline has been pulled forward. So there's a conversation, it most likely to happen in 2023 or 2024, which is something we don't want. This on top of the UN's request for the 10 years decades of science. So that's something we're trying to lobby with our government. My understanding is the ISA's policy and standards, regulation and standard and guidelines are out during consultation now. So we're actually lobbying our Prime Minister, also our offices in New York, for them to advocate for the ban, at least, if not the moratorium, 10 years, at least. Otherwise, we're calling for a total ban, both in our EEZ and the area. We're mobilizing a lot of work. Yesterday, we have talked to the governor of this island. So there are 5 main islands in Tonga. We have Tongatapu, where the palace is, and we have the second biggest island in Vava'u. We have been rallying support and also talking to their governor. Yesterday, we talked to Hawaii's governor, and he's very interested in deep sea mining, and he is very, what they call anti-TSM. So we're actually collecting a lot of support from Hawaii right now. And we have done tracer survey to confirm whether people are still supporting the stand not to have deep sea mining in Tonga and in the area. And so far, we still have 99% support. So we have a couple of people, 3 to be exact, who have changed position. DSMs and Domo, this is Tonga Offshore Mining Limited, who is actually sponsored or funded by Deep Green. They are actually having a few ministers within the government. We're still working on them. And the main reasoning behind it is that we're going to have some money, and that will help support Tonga, who is very much debt laden. So that is basically the reason where there is support. We might lose our country to China because the government have taken up so much loan from China. The only way we can actually combat this is to allow deep sea mining. But that is the very reason why we're trying to stop this, because we have done the maths, and the marine resources. Tonga is one of the biggest exporter of tuna and snappers. We are getting the #1 position in Hawaii, so we're supplying the biggest amount to Hawaii, and also Japan. China and Australia are coming up as well. So the promise, according to the contract that was signed with the Tongan government and Nautilus, which is now Deep Green, they are going to pay $1.25 American to every ton that they will dig up from the property that belongs to Tonga. And the latest calculation from MIT last year in November was 3.37 billion for that 300 million tons that they will dig up from Tonga. So you do the math, $1.25 for 1 ton, 3 millions. We won't even end up with 1% of that total amount. So, but the impact and the implication, if they're going to have deep sea mining in Tonga, they are going to kill our tourism. We depends a lot on whale watching, and we know the depth where this extractive industry will happen. It will provide too much noise, and we might as well kiss goodbye to all the whales that are coming from Tonga. The snappers and the tuna are known to feed around where they have the smokers, as you call them, Ian. So these are the massive sulfide that that's the minerals that we have in Tonga. Okay? So if it's going to happen, we are going to destroy the industry of fisheries as well. But we are calculating that $79 million is generated from fisheries and the tourism. So we're looking at less than 10 millions that will come from deep sea mining, sacrificing $79 million. It doesn't make sense. So that's the argument we're actually putting through to the government, to have, a really good thinking about what this industry will be bringing to Tonga. The environment and the implication that something might happen, because we don't know much. If we are actually mining the area and we're destroying the environment, our current law does not provide that safeguard that we need. We need a review of it. We need the regulation in place. We don't have any regulation yet. That's not passed yet. So there's too much loopholes, and these people are not registered. It might be in Tonga, but they're still Canadian companies. So if the if ISA is to actually enforce the call of the law, Canadian Deep Green will say that they are Canadian government, and Tonga will end up having to shoulder all the responsibility and the liability that this deep sea mining will generate. So I think I'll stop there, Yin, and allow people to ask questions or an area where I have yet to cover. But
Thank you, Tita. Yes, let's do that. Thank you. Is there already a question in the chat? I haven't seen one.
Not yet.
Okay.
I see one hand up. That's Emma Jacobi. Please ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much, Jan. I didn't know if I should write the question in the chat if I want to ask it in English or if only in German. Is it okay if I just ask it like this?
Oh.
Okay. Well, Tita, first of all, I wanted to say thank you. It was so great to hear your perspective and lots of really informative things that you've said. I just wanted to ask a question because you mentioned that in Deep Green's campaign, especially over the last 6 months or 1 year, they've left out Tonga's name a lot, and that activists in Tonga see that as a success. Could you elaborate on why? I didn't fully understand why they see that as a success.
Okay. Majority, in my thinking, majority of the lobbying and campaign they did is to actually get investors and the potential places where they will, like Kiribati and Nauru. Because Tonga is making a lot of political noises about this, not only on the domestic forum, but as well as internationally. We're actually joining a lot of people who are actually lobbying directly toward companies and investors and governments, parliaments. I think they are going to drop Tonga pretty soon. That's my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And because we don't have that much of the resources compared to the other two, we might be a risk they don't want to carry.
Interesting.
So also, my understanding is Kiribati and Nauru are not making any noise at all. And given how Nauru's government is, their CSO are very, very quiet because a lot of their funding comes directly from government. We can see why both Kiribati and Nauru are not making as much noises as we are making here in Tonga. We also have had part of our strategy is if the Prime Minister is not going to do anything about this and make a firm decision on banning deep sea mining, we're going directly to the King. So we're already preparing letters to the Palace Office asking appointment with the King. But I have always seen Deep Green using the Pacific bloc as a selling point. And the more in the group, the better. They'll be seen by investors as, oh yeah, we have the support of these so many islanders. I see that the slow drop of Tonga's name from the grid as a success because they see as so much as a risk. The political noise and the presence we're actually making in the international forum is a risk they don't want to take. And we have always been the initiator of, if there's a letter from the Pacific, let's do it. Our chairperson will sign it first before it goes to anywhere else. And even if Tonga is the only country who will be signing it from the Pacific, we'll sign it. If it means that it will have an impact on the debate, yes, we'll do it. And we've been lobbying directly with the government, the prime ministers, whoever will be listening. We're doing the churches, the governors, the youth groups, the women. And because people know their livelihood dependent in the ocean, we're not arguing about the money. Yes, that's part of the discussion, but it's not part of how many Deep Green will be buying from us or paying for the dunnage they'll take. It's not about the science because we don't know it. And we don't have enough scientists in Tonga to validate or confirm. So a lot of this we're depending on our friends from international organizations. So our main focus have always and will forever be our ocean is our livelihood. What you do to our ocean will impact the people's livelihood. So, and it seems to be working. People are fearing that we already have climate change issue here. Our corals are dying, sea level are rising. To add more to it will be just too much. So, and that's how I see the fact that we're slowly being dropped from the whole mentioning of deep green is a success. We're becoming too much of a hot potato for them. And it's a risk they can't afford, because if their main focus is to get investor and get as much money, and if they're going to do what they did in Papua New Guinea, jump ship before the whole Chapter 11 thing, they're going to do the same thing. We are becoming a liability, and they are going to drop us from the whole discussion, and that will be good for us. But we're not just doing this for Tonga, we're doing this for the Pacific and the rest of the world. So the fight will be ongoing. As far as we still have a spirit to fight and people out there who listen, we're going to rally on.
That's really incredible. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I might jump in and ask two little questions, if I might. There's no other hand up at the moment. Please feel free to write your question in the chat or just raise your hand. Two questions to kind of touch on this, what you just said, that the struggle is ongoing and it's only over when deep sea mining is not becoming a reality, not only in Tonga, but on the Pacific and the worldwide. And my question touches on the reality in Tonga itself, because in countries like Papua New Guinea, when people hear about deep sea mining, they hear mining, they already associate something with that. They see the Porgera mine, the Panguna mine, they see human rights violations, environmental destruction. As you mentioned before, you don't have that in Tonga. You don't have mining. So
no, we don't.
Is that a challenge for the campaign, that people don't really have an image in their mind when they think about mining, because they never saw a mine? Let's say in Germany we have mines and we have big strong movement against it because we know it. That would be the first question. Like, how is that a struggle, a challenge to your campaign on the ground? And the second would be, how is, what you say, like the political activism? Is it against mining or ocean protection? Many different issues. What's your reality in Tonga? Because in a bigger country like Germany, 80 million people, we know where our government is. It's in Berlin. We are doing our work here or with them. But I mean, I've been in Tonga. I know how kind of small the main island is and how close together everything is. Everybody kind of knows everyone. So what does that make with your campaigning, your political activism, being in kind of such a small community? Is it a good thing or a bad thing to be as close together as you are? So these are the two parts of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. As mentioned before, and as Julia kind of like laugh about it, probably the only biggest resources that we have is our people. As to allude to what the first king had mentioned. And yes, again, at the beginning when we were talking about mining, there were a lot of hesitation because people have never seen mining happening in Tonga. And that's where we brought in a lot of the videos. So a lot of our media campaign of visuals, pictures, pamphlets, videos, clips that people can actually see and visualize. And because the deep is such as it is, so unknown to many, we brought in people who have been deep fishermen. They actually, their livelihood, and they do explain the concept slowly. As one of our meetings, if you recall, I explained the concept of cold. When I explained to my family how cold Canberra was, They couldn't understand the concept. And I said, imagine going into the deep freezer and shutting yourself there for a couple of hours. That did the trick. Oh, really? That cold? Yes, that cold. That's what snow is like in places I've been to overseas. So when you explain the concept of mining to Tongan, there has to be some form of a reality for them to understand. So that's where the fishermen came in, and people who have actually have degrees and PhDs in these areas. They conceptualize it for Tongans, and we have a whole lot of videos. So The Economist, MIT, a lot of the Duke University, people who have actually have studies, and we brought people who are independent, because we know that Deep Green knows like what they lump us together and term us as the anti-miners. So we brought independent studies to prove that, this is it. These are what they're saying, and it's not just because we are saying it, that these people have actually proven it. Second question is how small and minute Tonga is compared. You're talking about a couple of millions. We're talking about 110,000 people, total population for Tongan. And yes, everybody knows everybody else. And standing on the opposite sides are not always good. But you have to have the conviction. People who don't know the truth would sit on the borderlines. And that's what we're doing. We're actually having the resources and the materials, and we're out there every week on the radio and the TV telling people what it is. And the latest information that's coming up, we're having them out there. So people will have the choices. And it's always it will be your choice. At the end of the day, the choice you make today will impact what your children and grandchildren will have it in the future. So it always works because we'll convince some of the younger generation of what's happening, or a little bit more savvy as far as the technology is concerned. They convince their parents. And once they have been convinced, that's it. When you ask, why do you believe it? Oh, my son said so. And if my son said so, I will believe him because he's the only one who will care about me. And so the network is small and it's a challenge, but once you convince them, they will support you. And we have a lot of outreach program that Deep Green is not making the leadway. Last year, they advocate for anyone to apply. They received over 600 applications, and they only approved 7 of them. So that was a big disappointment because they had a big do over the public forum, over the radio, the media. So it was disappointing, sadly for them, but it was a good success for us. Because people said, oh, if they're lying about that, imagine what else they're lying about. So,
Thank you. I think we have one more question, Julia.
Yeah, Tita, I have a more personal question. In such a small community like on Tonga, you must be well known as an activist, an anti-deep sea mining activist. What happens to your own business reputation when you go to official reunions by parliamentarians or industry people who are pro-mining? Do you risk, but you won't risk your life, that's clear to me, but do you risk your professional reputation, or are you kind of seen of an enemy to modernization of the country or to getting more money into the country?
Julia, thank you. And that's something, my 2 older daughter, one is working for the Ministry of Land and Survey, which approved deep sea mining license. My second daughter is working for the Prime Minister's office. But I have been working in Tonga since 1903. No. Oh, gosh. I've been working in Tonga for over 30 some years now. Everybody I work for the government, for the NGO, private sectors, run my own little consultancy. One thing that people know about what I do is I don't fluff my way through, and I will only commit to what I believe that they are good for the government. I meet people who are saying, what are you doing? This is good for the government. And I said, until you prove to me otherwise, you're not going to change for me. And we had this conversation last week. Drew had it with the Prime Minister's secretary to government. And he said, you and Tita are opposing the government. You civil society are not supportive of the government. And Trish said, no. Everything that civil society is doing is in support of the national development and development goals. One thing you can't persuade us otherwise is deep sea money. We're not backing down, we're not backing out. As long as you guys are going to approve deep sea money, we'll be full head on. We're going to go all the way until they ban it in our EEZ and in the world. So I am not ashamed of what I'm doing, and because people see that as one of my MO. I will not commit to this if I don't fully believe it. And my daughters respect my choice. And they have been called upon a couple of times, but they said, Mom would not do what she's doing if she did not believe it. So if you don't prove to her otherwise, she's never going to change. So yeah. It's a challenge, but
yeah, I imagine. Yeah. Thank you, Tita.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks, Tita. We have one more hand, and then we have a look on the time, that we have some time left for wrap up and maybe one or two questions. Eckhart, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me. I can't see me anymore. Yeah, great. Sorry you can't see me anymore. The camera switched off. Tita, I have a question in regards to the relationship between the Tongan government and the Deep Green Company. What you mentioned a license. What kind of a license did the Tongan government give to Deep Green? Is that to operate an office simply in Tonga, or is that including exploration activities? What does it cover, that license? And second question would be, is that the total legal arrangement between the Tongan state and the company, or is there also, has the Tongan state engaged by having a stake in the company? I ask that because in Papua New Guinea with the Nautilus company, that was an issue that the PNG government had a stake, 15%, I think, in the company. So when the company did go down, the PNG government lost a lot of money.
Yes. Thank you, Eka. Those are very valid questions, and thank you for raising them. Tonga's contractual arrangement with the Nautilus, now Deep Green, is for exploration. So they have the license to explore both our EEZ and the area. Since Nautilus taken over by Deep Green, they have not done any exploration in Tonga. So their main focus now is basically in the area. Any other arrangement, my understanding is no. There are no investment or whatsoever apart from the administration costs that Nautilus, the Deep Green is actually paying for Tonga. Domo, which is a subsidiary of Deep Green, is registered in Tonga, but it does not have a local director. before, when Nautilus was in existence, they had a local person who was also part of the board directors. Now they only have a country manager who manage their office here, and it's one single person whom I mentioned earlier have recently passed away. But that's my understanding. That's basically the only arrangement we have, the government has with Nautilus. And that contract was signed back in 2008. So we have been asking a lot of questions, and the government are not forthcoming with any of the information that we wanted. But we understood it's only the license here in Tonga of the office, and also only for exploration. So I know the offer was also up for Kiribati. The company was offering $1 per share. So they're offering $50,000 that could use for any local loan, or they can use the $50,000 to buy share within Deep Green. That offer was not made to Tonga, and my understanding is there was no other offer for Tonga, and there is no other contractual relationship apart from the exploration. And the ISA's last contract expires next year. So that's their 15 years.
Okay.
And we're lobbying for it not to be, we're currently lobbying for it not to be extended.
Thank you, Tita. As you mentioned already, Nauru and Kiribati as potential sites for further operation of Deep Green. Do you have any information on the contractual situation there? Has Deep Green entered into any license agreement or arrangement with those two states, or any other form of legal arrangement already, or what is that situation currently?
My understanding that both has similar offer, like Tonga. Kiribati was a new one. Nauru was one of the original contract, same year with Tonga. My understanding was the contract arrangement started in 2008, and Kiribati was later on. I think it was 2013, if my recollection is correct. The offered the same to Tonga, 20,000 upfront, and basically for exploration. Kiribati offer is different because they have that $50,000 offer from Deep Green. They could use that for loan if they want, or otherwise they can actually use that to buy share from Deep Green for $1 per share. So that is the arrangement I understand, both on Kiribati and Nauru.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eckart, and thank you so much, Tita. Is there another question? I don't see any hand up, nothing in the chat. Oh, there is one hand. Please, Emma, go ahead.
Thank you. I have one more question, which is, you spoke quite a bit about Tonga being kind of like an initiator of Pacific campaigns against deep sea mining. And I was just curious how you view the role of other Pacific states in this. Like, is there a lot of communication between activists in the Pacific states on this matter? And also, what is your message to them in terms of reflecting on their activist movements? I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Emma. And also to elaborate more about what I see as Tonga being, in the forefront of the work that we do on deep sea mining, is I am privileged that the chairperson of my organization is a very avid supporter of what we're doing as well. So the turnaround time for our board is much faster than it happens anywhere else in the region, because they're a bigger organization in Papua New Guinea and in Fiji. So that whole approval process usually takes time. So, and they know how fast it is for our turnaround time in Tonga. So most of the time we lead that whole process. We also have the Pacific a strategy group that I mentioned before. We have a lot of Pacific Islanders being part of that. We have Papua New Guinea, we have New Zealand, we have Tonga, Fiji, we have various youth groups and many other organizations across the world. We also have our own regional one that led by Bang in Fiji and Piango. So this trip group just launched the Pacific Blue Line statement about deep sea mining. So I don't know, Jen, whether this has been circulated to you, but that could be shared, and that's have really, really powerful message from all throughout the Pacific Islanders in various form of mining, not just the deep sea mining as well. The Pacific region also are currently developing their 2050 Pacific strategy on Blue Line as well. And the main focus is actually on the ocean, how to manage this properly, and the resources that will go out and into the ocean. So more or less. So the discussion about deep sea mining is not only within civil society, it's across the region, and it's a big issue. Everyone is doing their little bits and pieces on mobilizing this. My message to anyone who's actually campaigning for deep sea mining is don't give up the fight. You know, it's not over until we have a total ban on deep sea mining. And what we're actually doing, because we seems to be the research hub for the rest of the world, you know, we have a powerful position to say no. You know, if they're actually using the Pacific as a backyard to destroying a whole lot of these industry, then we can say, no, we don't want it. We want a cleaner Pacific Island. And we can start by saying no today, you know, rather than waiting for later on. We know that deep sea mining is going to impact. We already have a lot of resources on land that could support this blue economy. Maybe not deep sea mining. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tita. And I think that was really important and also powerful call now in the end, saying that, yeah, deep sea mining needs to be stopped, and it has to be stopped in the Pacific first, because you are at the front line of the struggle and the new industry rush to get the treasures out of the deep sea. And that's also my limited understanding of the Pacific, is that it has to be stopped where it occurs. Like in Papua New Guinea, the Alliance of Sawara Warriors, and some of you might know this alliance, they were able to stop Nautilus minerals in the Bismarck Sea, and I think they couldn't have done that from Port Moresby. They have to be on the ground in the coastal communities, and then I think it's the reality all over the Pacific. And deep sea mining won't be stopped in Berlin or in New York, or even probably not even in Suva. It can be stopped on the islands and on the outer islands where Tita is just located now, like in the communities with the fisher folks and with the people who might be impacted by deep sea mining if it becomes a reality. And I mean, that's also, I think, quite motivating for the international community, that we have a chance to support activists on the ground who can stop an industry before it becomes a reality. That's not often the case. We can have, I think it's important to highlight human rights violations and environmental destruction with terrestrial mining as well. But we have it already, and it has impacts for centuries. But deep sea mining is not yet a reality, and we all can support Tita and her colleagues on the ground all over the Pacific, in Tonga, in Papua New Guinea, in the Cooks, from here as much as we can to make sure that there is no deep sea mining in the future, that we at least have a moratorium, but better have a ban for good, because we won't need it, and we don't want to have it, and it's not consented. And that's also the line of the blue line statement, drawing the Pacific blue line. I just put the URL in the chat, where organizations all over the Pacific rallied behind the statement. We don't want to have deep sea mining, and we draw the Pacific blue line. And I think it's always good to end such a session with like a call to support this. And it's actually possible to support the blue line statement. As Tita just said, you can support it as an individual. You don't have to be like an organization to support the call. So you're all invited to do that. It's one little step to support the really important and incredible work Tita and her colleagues are doing all over the Pacific. And as Oceanien-Dialog, as Pacific Information Desk, Julia is representing, but also as West Papua Network, I saw Barbara also now in the group, we are all promised to do our best to assist in the struggle from our international arena as much as we can, in Berlin, in Geneva with the UN, in New York, and in Brussels. So I hope that motivates all of you to sign the petition. Thank you so much, Tita, for waking up early in Tonga, joining us this morning. It was a pleasure. I really enjoy talking to you always. We sometimes see each other on our Zoom calls, but rarely have the chance to chat like this. So I really appreciate that, enjoyed that. And as I said, please check out our websites. We frequently update these with news from the Pacific on the situation also in Tonga and other parts of the region. And thanks again for joining, all of you. And as I said in the beginning, this is the second event of 4 events during our theme months. Next week, we're gonna have a really interesting and kind of new topic when we talk with Professor Craig Santos from Guam about political activism, art, poetry, and culture, which is also kind of the heart and soul of the activism I feel in the Pacific. And the Monday after that, we're going to talk about armed conflict and human rights situation in West Papua. You're all invited to join us also next Monday and the Monday after that. I put the registration link in the chat. And thanks again for all of you. Thanks so much for Tita joining us. Maybe you can also have a last word if you like. To all the others, thanks for joining and have a wonderful sunny evening.
Thank you, Jen. Emma, did you want to ask something? I saw the hand sign. Oh, okay.
No, I was just clapping.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you very much, Ian, for the opportunity to actually speak on behalf of my chairperson and the campaign team from Tonga and the Pacific. It was a pleasure having met you, Julia, and the rest. So I'm wishing you, I'm just looking at the sun, so it's just dawning now in Tonga. So have a good day, everybody, and off from Tonga.